I'm pro rowing on water.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm pro like being active in nature, but as a mosh move, you gotta miss me with that.
Keep
That's just
rowboating out of hardcore.
Yeah, keep it out of everything, to be honest.
What is up, my friends? Thanks for tuning in. Again, this is the Scoped Exposure podcast. A band that undoubtedly has just been such a dynamic force in the, hardcore scene and the metalcore scene. One that when I was first getting into this shit, like really was on my radar was Harm's Way. And to have this lull between Posthuman to this new record that Harm's Way has kind of coming down the pipeline here, I was just like, so excited to have just to see this band finally kind of like come back with something new kind of in this post-COVID hardcore world. And James has always kind of been on my list of people to have here on the show, and it feels like the perfect time to finally do the damn thing. So you might know him as Hammers McPlugu, you might know him as the Running Man, but you definitely know him as James of Harm's Way. Dude, thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me on.
Of course. So, James, obviously we're going to talk about Common Suffering and a lot of like Harm's Way lore and all those things, but it's a must before we get into any of the music chats to do a Bev check, kind of check a Bev before we get into all of those discussions. And I know that you're a fountain drink aficionado, someone that I've felt like is the perfect blend to kind of this icebreaker thing that I hit everyone with on the podcast. So
Sure.
Tell me what you got to sip on for the episode.
I mean, this is a pretty daily thing. I drink a lot of Diet Coke, particularly. Some say I don't even drink water, that the blood runs Diet Coke. So that's the choice most of the time, and it's the choice right now. So
we love it. I know that what's your max amount of DCs that you've done in one day in a 24-hour cycle? Ever.
Oh man, that's a tough one. I mean, I've probably drank over 2 gallons of Diet Coke before in one day. I bet. I'm like a hot day, like just having like a cold. I mean, the fridge is always stocked with diet sodas. I like seltzer waters a lot as well, so I try to squeeze those in too. But there's definitely a day I bet you I drank, probably 12 to 14 cans.
That is wild, and I'm very curious about that because one of my very good friends, his name is Chris. He's recorded a lot of my bands. He's kind of based between Toronto and Regina here in Canada, and he just crushes the DCs like it's nothing. So I'm very curious about his maximum intake in a 24-hour cycle to kind of compare. He's a much smaller man compared to you, but maybe size doesn't matter when it comes to that.
No, for sure. It's I know that people have some beef with diet sodas, and for me, I've never had an issue. Blood work is good. The health is top tier. So I'm gonna keep doing it until it's not.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that because like my grandpa would brag because he's a coffee freak at some points. Before he was retired, he would drink 7 cups of coffee a day, kind of hit the local Tim Hortons here, and he would brag when he would go in for his like checkups. They're like, there's no elevated heart rate, there's nothing like crazy like that, and he's like, yeah, it's pretty much water. So whether it's black coffee or DC, it's all kind of water at the end of the day.
Well, yeah, I mean, all sodas, 99.9% 9% water, and then the rest is chemicals. So, I mean, that's really all you're getting in. I mean, obviously there's, probably some mixed reviews on the artificial sugars, but I'm a scientific guy, and the science until now says, unless you're drinking, I mean, like I said, 14 was like excessive one day. I mean, usually it's, probably 4 or 5 a day. So,
yeah,
unless you're excessively drinking artificial sugars, you're not at any risk of any cancers. So,
I mean, sometimes we have to test how far we can actually go to know that that's probably the limit as to how, like, that's the max that we should be doing.
Yeah, of course.
So I got like a bit of a multi-beverage combination here because, as a fellow bev man, I know that you have, certain preferences on, the types of things that you're drinking out of. I'm sure drinking out of the plastic container versus a glass or a can is, I'm sure you're stoked to drink the Diet Coke, but wish it might have been in something contained a little bit better. So
sure,
the first of two is the winter edition Red Bull, the fig apple flavor. I don't know if you've had this one yet.
I've never had that one before. No.
Yeah, it's I would say it's like a solid 7. I know that you grade things more in in letters, so I would say this is like a good like B-, I would say. It's not anything that's like over the top crazy, but it's been a while since I've had it.
Sure. But we got, what is it? Is it taste better than the last time, or is it about the same?
I'm going to go for the second swig to let you know fully. I think it's better. I feel like it's more established now. Like the apple is nice and refreshing. But like not just like straight apple flavor.
Well, hey, it's funny how far energy drinks have come as far as, I remember when Red Bull was the sole energy drink, and now there might be 50 different flavors that you can choose from. So it's pretty comical.
And I'm not gonna crack this open just yet, but also got the Topo Chico in the glass bottle, which is, I refuse to drink Topo Chico out of a plastic container. That seems like the ultimate sin. But we'll be opening that with the Buc-ee's bottle opener. So perfect. I know that you fuck with the Buc-ee's as well. So
Buc-ee's is great. Yeah. Topo Chico is also, it's probably second on my list of seltzers, Polar being number 1. But I love Topo Chico is really good as well. And to go back to the plastic bottle. So soda is very expensive now. So I usually just get what's on sale, or my dad gets what's on sale. And so basically, if I had to choose, it'd be can 1, glass bottle 2, fountain drink 3, plastic bottle 4, and then 2 liter 5. That would be my ranking system. But sometimes you just got to go with the deal.
Yeah. Convenience is king, right? So
sure.
Yeah. Well, dude, cheers to you. I'm really excited to do this podcast. The fact that we're already doing 9 minutes of Bev talk means that it will be a good episode.
Yeah, I mean, I could go longer, believe me.
Yeah, I'm sure, the people that have set up this interview, if we only talked about Diet Coke and beverages and not about the new record, I think I would probably get a questionable email. But, before we get into it, any new guests here, James, that I have on the show, I always like to get a little bit of origin about how they even just discovered hardcore in general. So kind of like what put them on the path that they're on now. So, you can make that as long or condensed as you want, because I know you've done years worth of interviews. So just tell me about like the first couple times that you were kind of hearing about all this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, I grew up in a household where we mostly listened to, classic rock and, heavy metal. So, the jump to punk and hardcore wasn't a big one for me. Obviously I grew up in the 90s. So, there was a lot of Q101 was the local radio station here. They were always playing Nirvana, Nine Inch Nails, Alice in Chains, So, that's the type of stuff I grew up on. And again, the classic rock stuff, Black Sabbath, Zeppelin, all that stuff, was introduced to me by my dad. And then, as I got a little bit older, one of my best friends growing up was a guy named Nick Donahue. Him and I got into punk kind of at the same time. It's kind of funny because it was a weird time as far as music went, because nu metal was really big. So I did have like a nu metal phase, not the appearance, but I did enjoy the music. Me and Nick kind of had got into that for a few years, and then it's kind of weird, like kind of right around that time we kind of got into like Fat Records punk. And I've talked about this on other podcasts, but there was a local record store called Busy Bee that was just like this guy who, I don't know if he was into punk or not, but he carried all like the new punk and hardcore stuff. And if you came to my town, you'd think that was quite strange, given where I grew up, that this guy would have that here. So it was awesome. He had, that's where I got, in 8th grade, we would go there. It was cheap too. I remember I got like the, Meyer Threat discography, Youth of Today, Break Down the Walls there, Grill Biscuits, Warzone. And then, that kind of transitioned into high school, being predominantly listening to hardcore. I really was into like fast hardcore and punk and Youth Crew. And then later in high school, I got into heavier hardcore. And from basically post high school, I got more into like death metal and heavier music in general. I would say that's predominantly what I listen to as far as music now. But the beginning was mostly just the classics. And then there actually was a very big screamo scene in my county. So, before I could drive, I would go to shows of predominantly bands, that were kind of like grind bands or screamo bands, like Orchid or Satia or Planes Mistaken for Stars, like that type of music is what I was exposed to. But I always loved like Youth Crew and the classics. So like when I was able to go to the city finally, I remember there was a classic venue. Probably people who are my age and older would be familiar with the Fireside Bowl. A lot of classic shows happened there in Chicago. And I remember one of my first like big shows was a Bane show at the Fireside. So that was like kind of like my exposure to the Chicago hardcore scene. And then obviously I never left really. So.
Just kind of like, it seems like a very classic, like, finding something in a very like organic way and then just going like further and further down the rabbit hole. And I like to hear that even in like something that, cause you're like kind of in the suburbs, like kind of outside the main hub of Chicago, but like I like hearing how you were surprised that someone had a local record store that was carrying kind of the more niche stuff that like you would think you would only find in like the big city at the 5th record store that you've been to. And to me, that's really cool. Cause like it kind of reinforces the idea of like, you don't have to be from like the biggest hardcore scene city to be able to do something that's going to have an effect on someone, whether you're starting a venue, a record label, or anything like that. Like there's a trickle down effect that, no amount of videos or documentation can even trace every single connection point that you're making.
Sure. And I mean, obviously now, getting into independent music in general is a lot easier.
For sure.
I mean, obviously when I was getting into punk, a lot of it was, word of mouth, reading liner notes, trying to find, bands on, Audio Galaxy or Napster or whatever, and it's just obviously the exposure is just so much greater now for, all, heavier bands and punk. I mean, and you could see it obviously going to shows and, looking at bands, like Knock Loose or Turnstile, that the exposure, is just reaching far beyond what it probably would have ever been able to, in a different time period.
For sure. It's weird. It was someone came into my work like literally a couple days ago, and they were wearing like a Mastodon shirt. And I like don't listen to Mastodon, but I'm like, that's way closer of a connection than someone wearing a Taylor Swift shirt or something like that.
Sure.
And I just kind of like made mention of it, and we started talking about music and just kind of like metal and some of those things. And they said something that was like, oh, I only find out about concerts through Spotify. And I thought that was just the strangest thing, because it's like, that is like the last place that I would seek after to be able to do that. Like, and I don't know if that's a difference in like focus, where it's like, oh, I might just see something pop up when I'm streaming music, and then I'll go buy the $150 music ticket, versus like, I'm going to get into the forums, I'm going to get into the Facebook groups to like find out what's happening in my city.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it's obviously I'm not even that old. I'm 37, going on 38, and just the way music has changed in the last 20 to 25 years, and the exposure and how it's consumed. It's pretty crazy. But obviously it has a lot of positives. The exposure is just so much greater as a band, and obviously you're able to get your music out to more people, which is cool. But obviously there's a lot less of the uniqueness to independent music, and kind of what's the word I'm looking for? The more isolated music genre. Whereas before it kind of felt a little more special, because you had to know, you had to know,
you had
about
to
the
actually
band.
work for it. Yeah.
And and that's not in any gatekeeping way. I'm not trying to say that, but I've always said, hardcore can be for everyone, but it's not for everyone.
For sure.
Right. And now I think with the exposure, it opens up the door for more people, which is good. But it also opens up the door to a lot of people who may not understand its function.
Right.
So, but yeah.
So
that's about it.
We've talked about the origins of you. I want to talk quickly about like the origins of Harm's Way, because now it's coming up. In a couple of years, like Harm's Way will be 20 years old, which is like pretty wild, I'm sure, for you to kind of like reflect on. Just because I'm taking Wikipedia information with a grain of salt, but it seems that at least on there it says that Harm's Way was kind of like the side project / it was like a joke band originally. Anything you want to correct the record on that I can like go and adjust any of the Wikipedia stuff, or if someone's goofing there?
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess we were never a joke. The lyrics were a little more outrageous, but they were still serious.
Sure.
But it was a side project we were in a band called Few and the Proud.
Mm-hmm.
Which it was more of like a New York hardcore style band. And, we just decided one day that we wanted to do more of a power violence, fast hardcore style band with me singing. And, we would practice from time to time. It was pretty here and there. We had a demo, and then, we had a 7-inch, and we just played once in a while. But as time went on, that became the band that held the most interest for others as well as us. And obviously that developed and grew, and we're all really close friends. And the Chris and Bo obviously our original members, and now Nick and Casey came a little bit later on. But obviously I would never have imagined the band lasting this long, to be honest. I never, it was always, just a fun hobby. And then, pretty much I would say around Rust era of time, that's when things just started to get a little bit bigger. And, it's hard to say, if it's a job or you're making a living or whatever, but it's something that, we can do professionally and put all of our effort into now. And, and it's worth it, and I've said this before, but I don't think Harm's Way will ever break up officially. We might tour less or we might put out music less, but, I think we'll always be a band and be open to playing shows or creating new music, just because it's just a big part of all of our lives. I think it's just something that will continue, whether to the degree it is, now or it was in 2017 or 18. I don't know, but it's definitely something that I think we all would love to continue. I'm gonna turn this light on so you can see me better.
You're getting a little in the shadows, just a little bit. Were you singing in that band prior to Harm's Way, or was there more of a string position that you were filling?
So I used to play bass in Few and the Proud, and I'm like drawing a blank. I think did Chris play drums? No, our friend Drew played drums.
Okay.
Chris played guitar. Bo played guitar. The singer of or actually, I don't even know. I'm like, I'm having like, man, that's really weird. I played bass.
Yeah, that's the main question. You don't need to remember what everyone was wearing when the demo came out.
No, I know. It's just funny. I had like a brain fart. I'm like, wait a minute. Like who did what?
Mm-hmm.
I think our friend John, who sang for, Weekend Nachos, he played drums in Few and the Proud, I believe.
It's wild to hear that Chris didn't play drums because he's just a fantastic drummer. So I would just assume
he played drums in like everything else.
This was the outlier kind of situation.
Well, because that band turned into a band, Convicted, which our friend Drew played drums and Bo played guitar. I played bass. Chris played guitar. And then we used to have a vocalist. His name's Bernie. He sang. And then when he left the band, that band turned into Convicted.
Got you.
Which that coexisted with Harm's Way for about 2 or 3 years. We did some tours together, and then Harm's Way kind of took off from there. But yeah, no, I played bass in both of those bands. So
gotcha. Were you doing like backup vocals, or was it kind of like you're like, I guess I'll sing or I'll give it a shot? Like, what was kind of like the transition for you? Was it like pretty natural, or were you kind of hesitant at first?
I don't think I was hesitant. Obviously, I think anybody who starts doing vocals, I guess the worry is how you're going to sound. And I guess I don't want to say it came natural, because I don't think it did. But at first it was just literally yelling, all throat. I would blow my voice pretty often, honestly, when I first started singing. It was a pretty regular thing of me like feeling like shit after we would play. But it was, I guess like we just thought it'd be fun to have me sing in a band. That was kind of like where it all started, because I also played bass in a band, Expired Youth, which was a youth crew band as well. So, that's 3 different bands playing bass, and, now, we wanted to do something different, you know?
I listened to that when I was doing research for this podcast. I listened to the Expired Youth. I think it's the demo. It's like the green and purple record, or I'm not sure the color scheme, but I was like, there's no way this is James vocals, because it is like the starkest of difference as far as styles.
Oh yeah. I played bass in that band, and that's probably the set. You probably listen to the 7-inch, because because that's all we were able to ever get out. Actually, we had an LP written, and then the band kind of fell apart, unfortunately. Um, but yeah, I mean, yeah, vocals just kind of happened, and then now obviously I only do vocals for the bands that I'm in. But
right. You got the itch to kind of step away from the mic and pick up the bass again, or that's neither here nor there?
Like there was a transitional period in Harm's Way, pretty much when we were writing Posthuman, where Casey wasn't in the band yet, where I played bass, on all the songs and demos, that we did for Posthuman. So that was, I guess, a taste of the bass again. Chris and I have talked about doing another band, a side project. But the thing is, I'm already in 2 bands. He's already in 2 bands, and there's various others he's occasionally playing with,
right.
So like, it's just tough to say you're going to sit down and actually make something of quality. So, maybe when Harm's Way is not as busy, as far as, preparing everything with the new record and the touring and that type of thing, we can, concentrate on that. But, it's tough as obviously you get older, you have to kind of pick and choose what you want to do. It's not like you're 18 anymore and all of your free time can go to writing music.
So I wanted to talk because, when, you brought up Rust, and that was like definitely like the first record that I kind of like really started to pay attention as far as what y'all were doing. And there's a moment from the Amongst the Rust music video where you were being like dragged on the floor and screaming at the camera.
Yeah.
Can you talk? Because there's a lot of just like shots in music videos nowadays where it's like, oh, okay, like, and I'm speaking of this like as a videographer, I film shows and do a lot of like stuff on top of doing this podcast. So I see a lot of the, okay, they're using a fisheye, they're kind of doing this technique either in the edit or in the camera. There has never been any other music videos or types of hardcore things where I've just seen a vocalist being dragged and being unfazed by it. Do you remember shooting that and kind of like what went into getting that kind of shot?
Yeah, I mean, so basically, for that particular music video, I mean, I will admit I hate filming music videos. Like as a musician, it's very awkward, really. And, it's hard to really do something unique, I feel, as a musician, that's different from, a lot of your peers, or to stand out. So,
right.
So that being said, like, I was pretty resistant on, trying a lot of things for a long time, but obviously if you want to make things interesting and new, you got to try different stuff. So I made everyone else in the band leave the room, I believe. And, because obviously it would just lead to laughing or, goofiness. So, I believe I laid on a carpet and the other, members that were helping with the music video, like dragged me. And then I like rehearsed the lines. I think we did it, 3 or 4 times until we got, multiple takes. So I wasn't actually being dragged, like I wasn't physically being dragged by my.
I'm sure there was some kind of like layer to at least not have just like your back being dragged on cement. Like,
yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, that was. I mean, like I said, it's you want to try new things, in music videos and try to make them interesting and creative and. You still want them to be a representation of the band from an artistic perspective.
For sure.
So, it's interesting when you try stuff like that. But, I think that's a cool part of that music video.
It's like the shot like speaks for itself. It's super sick. And again, I've seen no one replicate it as well. So, Your move, hardcore world. Harm's Way
Yeah.
has the title. So another question that I ask a lot of people, James, when they come on the podcast and they have many albums, a big body of work behind them, I kind of like to put the guests kind of put the fire under your butt a little bit. So, what, in your opinion, because this could change member to member in the band, whether they're doing drums or guitar, what, in your opinion, is the most underrated Harm's Way track? And what's the most overrated Harm's Way track? What's the one song that you're like, I wish we could play this more, but we might not get like a huge reaction? And what's the one song that you're like, all right, we're at this part of the set and I have to get through it and smile along the way?
So I don't know if there's any. I'll start with the second one first.
The overrated.
So
okay.
I don't think there's any track that we play in our set list anymore that is one where I'm like, I don't know why people like this song, like it, or I don't feel like there's anything that I have to like fake my way through, really. But I guess if we're going overrated songs, I actually think Scrambled is a little bit overrated.
Okay.
But to me, that's a contextual song in the sense that, like, based on the popularity of that record at the time, and it being the start of the album, it was always a very popular song. And I mean, obviously, we've played that song 1,000 times or more. And I guess I don't think it's a bad song at all. I do get a little bit tired of playing that song for whatever reason. So that, I guess I would say that one. But I think a lot of the underrated material is actually on Blinded. And I Blinded, to me, I don't know if it just wasn't received as well, because it was the follow-up to Isolation. But I think that the songs on Blinded are really cool and really dark, and there's a lot there that we haven't ever really played live. I think we played obviously we've played Mind Control lots of times, but that's really the only song that we play on a regular basis, or have played on a regular basis. So that I would actually probably include that whole record as one that a lot of songs I really like as a musician, and obviously being a part of the record, that I don't think a lot of people are even aware exists.
I don't think there's ever been a time where when I've kind of done this question where someone's included one track and then a whole record is being underrated. But I do love that you did that, though.
Sure.
So we're talking about a little bit of like older music. Let's talk about the new record that's coming out. Before we get into some of like the details about what people can expect and what you're most excited about, like I kind of said in the intro, like Posthuman, as far as like the last like full main staple record that you guys dropped, was 2019. 2018, yeah. So even further back. So it's kind of like a 5-year stint versus like this next one that's coming out. And when I had Jake from Judiciary on the show, talking about their new record, he kind of said a similar thing. It was like all this wait time. It was like hardcore has changed so much, especially kind of post-COVID. So are people going to still like fuck with us or remember us or like kind of get the same kind of day? Were you having a similar experience? Were you kind of more staying focused on like, let's just put this thing in the crock pot and let it just simmer and just have it all come out at one go and it will be a quality thing? What's been going through your mind over the last 5 years with, leading up to inarguably your biggest release, and debut on Metal Blade at the time?
Yeah. I mean, it's tough because COVID, I think, really threw a wrench into a lot of things. It obviously created a much more difficult time in meeting up and practicing. And that's, to be honest, one of the major reasons that the record took the amount of time that it did. It just, we didn't have, everyone was not in a situation where they could come together. There was different risks involved. People had some autoimmune things going on. They were living with people that had, were a lot higher risk. So it just was, when you're trying to figure out something in the unknown, it's hard to, make the judgment call on what's right. So we spent a lot of time on Zoom, and I think I was a little obviously nervous, just like anyone would be, that, if we did put out something new and, time kept going by, that things would be not as good, because Post-Human was really well received. And, I would say that was probably out of the time that we were a band, was like a peak time for us. And that came to an abrupt end. We had tours, planned for 2020, and, obviously those got canceled. So, that was something that obviously I think any musician at the time was kind of fearful of, that if we wait and we wait. However, our manager, James Vitalo, he kind of assured us that, that if we put out something of quality and, people maintain interest by, doing some other things, still playing shows, still, we did the Isolation anniversary show. We did those type of things. It would still, people would still be interested, and I think that kind of reassurance really helped me. I won't speak for everyone, but, for me, just saying, okay, like, if people still care, I'm, and again, I don't do the band for really anyone else except myself and my bandmates. So like, that really was, I wasn't concerned that like, oh, like it's going to flop and, I'm going to be so bummed. Like, I don't honestly really care about that, but just from like, a financial perspective, in the sense of like, all right, if we're going to invest all this time and money, like, are we going to be able to tour on the record? Even, are we going to be able to, make it how it was for Post-Human? And I think those are all valid questions, but, definitely, it definitely crossed my mind at one point in time, like, if we ever would be a band to the peak that we were during Post-Human, just because so much had changed and a lot of our life situations had changed. But, thankfully, after everybody, got vaccinated and felt more comfortable, meeting together, we started practicing a lot more. We started, just doing a lot more. And I think the confidence started to increase, that, we're going to put a lot of time and effort into this record, and it's going to be something of quality. So that like, I guess, was something that I knew if we were able to do that, I'm not afraid to any musician who puts themselves out there, they're opening up their possibility of being criticized and it being no one caring. And that's something that probably not a lot of bands talk about, but it's a very vulnerable position to be in, when you're, you put all this time, effort into lyrics, and then, some idiot on the internet will be like, oh, this sucks, or this band sucks, or whatever. And, you could say it doesn't bother you. And I try not to let that stuff affect me. And most of our band tries as well not to, but, sometimes, it's hard not to internalize when you put, like, especially for this record, we had been through a lot individually, just like with COVID, some deaths in the family, we were dealing with, a lot of personal issues as well. And I think like going through all this stuff and like still being able to like come out with a new record, given all that happened, I think, that's why this record means the most to me, that out of any record I've ever created, because it's one that I thought maybe would never come out on one time. So, whether people like it or not, it's going to be one that I'm most proud of. And, it's truly a record lyrically where I, you know, thought about, a lot of dark times. And if you read the lyrics, you'll see that there's a lot of, dark thoughts that are kind of translated into lyrical form, just because that's what was going on,
Right.
during the time period. So,
Yeah. And even if you like kind of remove like the naysayers, like the people on the outside, like it's it's funny how like when something good happens for you in a band, like you get on a record label or you have a really successful last release, it kind of like sets the bar that high, and then you're like, oh shit, can I hit that same bar and like even go higher than that? Or like, you start to have the questions of self-doubt in the middle of that, and that's just internalized within yourself. And then you have everyone else who's either singing your praises or screaming the curses at you. So I think, I think you're totally right that like it's whenever you're doing anything musically or creatively in general, like it needs to like you need to be doing it for yourself. You need to kind of be your own biggest fan in a way, and then let the love and hate kind of like like equal out itself. Cause like if you're only focusing on that for yourself, then everything else is kind of neither here nor there. I think I had to teach myself, like, especially early on with doing all of my creative endeavors, of like not getting too high on the highs with the people like dabbing you up, being like, the goats, the fire emojis, all that kind of shit, to the people that are like, this is absolute trash fire dog shit. So if like you don't,
yeah,
because if you get too high on that, you're gonna really get down on when someone's
sure.
calling you the wackiest band on the scene or whatever.
Sure. Yeah. There's a clip from, it was a pretty recent interview from Rick Rubin talking about, if you create music, with the intention of pleasing others, right, you'll never get the satisfaction or fulfillment, you know, that you'll get from, making music that you're creating for yourself. Right.
Right.
And when you create something for yourself and you put the time and the quality is good, the right people who are going to hear it and like it will work itself out. And that's kind of how I've always approached music, is that we can't you can't go into something saying we're going to sound this way and please this group of people, and we're going to go into it trying to be popular, because that's all subjective. There's nothing, there's no formula saying that you're going to put out these songs and you're going to do something this way and people are going to like it. I mean, obviously, there's certain song structures that pop song structure that has tended to be more the structure that are of the popular songs, because they're catchy and there's certain things you can do. But good quality music is good quality music. It doesn't matter what genre it is, and I think that, I think a lot of younger people now, they want to skip a lot of steps of, just making a demo, and then overnight they want to be, like Turnstile, and I don't, the reality of music is you have to keep grinding and grinding and grinding, and you may never get to an audience level that you want to get to, and that's fine, but you have to accept that the effort that you put in and the amount of time that you tour and do all these things, like that will pay off eventually. But that might be 10 years from now, but that's kind of the thing. I think that a lot of bands, like I would say that the majority of bands don't start to make money, right? They start out to, be a part of something that they enjoy doing. And I think whether you make money or not, like that shouldn't change. Like if you don't enjoy doing it, then you shouldn't do it. And especially as I get older, like, touring gets harder, playing shows gets harder, like physically, my body hurts, I need to sleep more. I don't want to go to bed at 3 a.m. But like, those are some sacrifices that you need to make, but you also need to, adjust your lifestyle so that it still is enjoyable and you still want to do it, or else, that's going to show in the live show. It's going to show in the quality of music, and you see it all the time. I mean, not as much in hardcore, but, in metal, you see bands just kind of going through the motions, and it's just really boring. It doesn't seem genuine, and I think that's like one thing I'm really happy about our band. I think if we ever felt like, hey, this record's not as good as the last, then we wouldn't put it out. I don't think we ever would strive for, mediocrity. And again, I think that that's also why the record took as long as it did, because we usually start, like previous records, we've just written the amount of songs that are going to be on the record.
Right.
We're going to do 10 songs. We're going to go into the studio with 10 songs. For this record, we probably wrote 20 songs, and we tried to, limit, we try to reduce the songs that we thought weren't as good. And then, we found that the 10 best that we felt would be part of the record, and, that process, it's hard, right? Because like when you create something, you start to be like, oh yeah, this song's awesome. And then, you're like, it's not that good. And then, you're like, obviously you're your biggest critic, right? So like you start to, I think, get into your head a little bit as far as, is this part interesting, or the transition's good, or, so.
It's also a wild thing when like you've been crafting a song for like 3 years or like a long span of time, like, and then someone hears it once and either they don't get it, they just don't, it doesn't catch them right away, and they're like talking shit on it immediately. Like sometimes if I listen to a record of a band that I love and I don't like it off of the first listen, I just like hit that shit on repeat, because I'm like, I need to understand where y'all went, whether it's like a different sonic venture or like, you're kind of leaning more into like just a certain thing. Like because I'm, again, like you spent a lot of fucking time writing these songs. So it's not just like, oh, we just wrote it and then uploaded it to Spotify that same day. And now you're like, that's not how there's not that fast speed of, especially for a band of your magnitude, for sure.
Yeah, no, and I think, I mean, that going back to kind of how music is consumed, a lot of music is consumed through playlists, and it doesn't listen to the record as a whole. And I think like sometimes you miss a lot by doing that, because, in my opinion, I look at full LPs or records as full pieces of art. That includes the artwork, the layout, the record, the way the track listing is ordered. Mm-hmm. That all plays a part in like how the record is perceived. And I don't think a lot of younger people, at least, consume music that way anymore. But, I think, like you said, like, you might listen to a single and say like, what is this? But when the single is a part of like a full LP, it makes more sense. And then that might be something that you later on, enjoy more, because you understand what the LP was trying to do in general. Right. So, but yeah, it's interesting, man. Because like I'm like complete opposite. I never listen to playlists. Like I only listen to full records. So, it's just weird to me when people say, oh, like, well, kids don't listen to the full record anyway. They just listen to, playlists. And I'm like, well, because like a big argument with bands always is like track listing and then side A and side B. But a lot of people don't even listen to music side A, side B anymore. So like, you kind of have to think about how important is that, in the way you order the tracks. But obviously you have to evolve with the times, and things are just different.
Yeah. So you were mentioning playlists and listening to full out. It seems like we're both in the camp of listening to records front to back.
Sure.
And so I wanted to kind of like transition a little bit into some muscle workout, weightlifting related discussions. And I like how I've heard in some interviews where you've talked about how like you don't like the idea that like not even just Harm's Way, but just heavy music in general. It's just like, oh, that's a lifting kind of band, or like there's kind of a weird kind of siloing effect. So as someone who's been working out for like probably longer, like more than 50% of your life, like I think that's fair to say, right? I think you started in like when you were 14, if I'm
Yeah, like
remembering
14,
correctly.
15. Yeah, so that's about 22 years.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So yeah, well more than half your life. Do you have specific albums that are like your go-tos when you're in the gym? Is there anything that would like catch people off guard that like, oh, that's like that wouldn't get me pumping iron, but like it does it for James? I'm kind of curious on that.
oh, so I mean, this might sound weird to a lot of people, but I actually most of the time lift in complete silence. So
Okay.
I know that like some people might think that's like psychotic, but um, I sometimes really just like being in my own thoughts, like while I'm lifting. Obviously there is lots of times where I've listened to music, and I've constructed some playlists with people. For me, if I do lift to music, it's all heavy stuff. Marauder, All War, 100 Demons, Dying Fetus, Suffocation. Pretty much that's what's selected. I don't listen to pretty much any other style of music if I do choose to listen to music. So, but if for some reason silence to me, like it just helps me get through the workout, helps me think, because I guess it depends, what you use lifting for.
Sure. Yeah.
For me, it's just as much physical or just as much mental as it is physical. So, it's clearing the head. It's, kind of unwinding at the end of the day, because I normally lift at night. And, that's the silence for me is just, I able to think, gather my thoughts, and then go home, grab a quick bite, and then go to bed. That's kind of how I do things.
Yeah. Well, that definitely was not the answer that I was expecting, as far as just like literally dead dead silence.
Yeah.
I guess like it's I'm sure you've seen that TikTok where it's like some chick and she's like, I know a song that all men love, and then it's like cut to like a blast beat or a guttural sound, but maybe for you it's just
Sure.
the sound of the weights just dropping onto the floor and just nothing else happening.
Yeah. I mean, my band has like made fun of me for this, because like I'm the day driver, and when we tour,
Right.
and I'll go 5 or 6 hours and not turn on one song and just drive.
You're like, no, it's quiet hour while I'm driving.
And like to a point where everyone else has headphones on,
Sure.
and I'm just driving. Right. So like, I mean, again, it's not all the time, but I think just being around music all the time, and like, I'm a teacher, things are loud all the time. Like sometimes I just like driving in silence, and same thing with lifting. It's just a time where I can like think, and there's not all this background noise, going on. So,
well, that's honestly like a really interesting take, because I think a lot of people would, who are probably listening, like myself included, sometimes like the minute I get into a car and I'm alone with my thoughts, like I either need to listen to a podcast, I need to call a friend. Like that's how like my ADHD just kind of runs rampant if I don't have that.
sure.
That stimulation, so to speak. But, it's maybe this is the challenge that I'm hearing from you, that I need to, spend more just quiet time, inspired by James from Harm's Way.
Sure. It's like, I mean, I guess it's like the same idea of like going to a show that's heavy hardcore or whatever, and then getting in your car and listening to Morrissey, right? like that is the contrast that's needed, because like in my opinion, you can't always be listening to heavy, angry music. Like you can, but like for me, it's just like I need those differences. I need those contrasts, or else I don't know. It's just it loses some of its what's the word? Luster, maybe.
Yeah.
Right. Like it just kind of loses its, if I'm always doing something, like for me, angry, like I'm either angry or, not having a good day. Like that's, when I listen to heavy music.
Mm-hmm.
When I'm having a chill day, I listen to, indie music or, the Smiths or Morrissey or The Cure or whatever.
Yeah.
That's kind of my chill music. And then, if I'm having if I'm having a happy day, maybe like, I'll throw on some classic rock or something like that, Neil Young or something like that,
Yeah.
So,
and maybe I'll just listen
I guess
to nothing. That's also cool too.
exactly.
Right.
Exactly. So, I'm more of a mood music guy, I would say.
I see. Yeah. It's yeah, I've always found it weird because, most of the time I'll like roll up to the, I'm at that point in the life where I can just roll up to the show. I don't need to roll with people specifically. It's like, I'm going to go to the show. I'm going to see a ton of folks. And 100%. I'm usually listening to something outside of heavy music. But the few times that it's just, I'm just thinking about this now that you've mentioned it. It's like, I've gone to shows with some people the odd time, and they're listening to the bands that they're going to go see. And I'm like, we're going to see this track live in like 2 hours probably. Like, it's just kind of weird that we're hearing it in this shitty car speaker when we're going to hear it in like a dope music venue sound system. So
Sure.
I don't know. It's just maybe a weird little over-analysis. But you were mentioning, being a teacher, you're in loud spaces. One thing I wanted to do to kind of like bridge these worlds, and we talked a little bit about your grading system, so to speak, versus giving like a yay or nay. So I'm gonna tee up some workout related mosh moves that you've probably seen at a show, maybe in North America, maybe in Europe. And I want to give you your chance to grade it and give your thoughts on it, if that's cool.
So letter grade, you're saying?
Yeah, letter grade.
All right, let's hear it.
So the first up, which is, I think, this will help kind of set the tone of what I'm trying to do, is the push-ups in the middle of the mosh pit.
That's an F for me.
That's an F. That's a straight failure.
Just, in my opinion, any goofy mosh to me is like, that's not for me. So I got to go. And to me, it's just like it's not a unique thing. It's not funny to me. So it's just like, especially when we're playing, because I almost take it as like a mockery. So for me, if I see that, that's just F material.
Mm-hmm. I would almost say that, like, if you're gonna start that, you have to go for the full song. Then I can be like, okay. But like 9 times out of 10, anytime I see that at a show, it's like a very scrawny dude who's doing it, like someone who like doesn't push up on the regular, if you know what I mean.
Sure.
Yeah. So that's, solid F. You're gonna have to do some extracurricular mosh moves to make up for that.
Sure.
I'm calling this next one the spinning barbell cyclone. So this is when someone like picks someone up like a barbell and then spins them around, whether they're using them as a crowd kill, human object, or just kind of doing it in the middle. Like, how would you grade that?
So spinning a person around, again, still a little too goofy for me. That's like, to me, would keep that at like a punk show or something like that, where the mosh is definitely more fun than not. So not as bad as the push-ups. So I'll go D.
Okay.
If you threw the person into the crowd, that would get higher. That would get a higher grade, like a B.
Okay. Only as high as a B. Okay.
That's more of like the mosh that I would preferably like to see.
Mm-hmm. The next one, I mentioned the European, because I've never seen this anywhere in North America, but I think a majority of bands in certain places in Europe, they do the Viking rowboat, in the pit. Is that enough? To me, that's a straight F as well. But you're the one giving the rankings here.
I mean, that is lower than the push-up.
Okay.
That is like
that's
we're
like
going,
suspension.
Like, school grade. That means like, you told me to fuck off on a paper directly to the dean. Minimum 10-day suspension.
Wow,
for that.
That's some serious.
I mean,
shit.
that might be one of the dumbest things ever, in my personal opinion.
Okay.
Like that, I can't think of something dumber at a show. But maybe you can bring something up that maybe I haven't thought about. But the rowing might be the dumbest thing I've ever seen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like I've never seen it in the flesh. Oh, sorry. I've seen one person do it, and I was like, okay, like move along. But when I see 20 people doing it at, when any band from our scene is playing in Europe, I'm like, why is this? Who started this trend? And why is it still going? Like, I don't like it personally.
Not a fan at all.
Yeah. This podcast is anti-rowboat. So if you're pro, you should probably stop listening to it. So
I'm pro rowing on water.
Yeah.
I'm pro like being active in nature, but as a mosh move, you gotta miss me with that.
Keep rowboating out of hardcore.
Yeah, keep it out of everything, to be honest.
That's fair. This isn't on the list, but I'm thinking about it just to try to extend a little bit. I would say I guess this would be the high jump over the vocalist move. What would you grade that? I don't even know what that is. So that would be like when there's a pile-up part and then someone is jumping, and usually it's going over the vocalist who's consumed by a lot of showgoers. So like it's essentially a stage dive into the sing-along? Yes. But like this is someone who's got proper stage dive presence, not a lot of the stuff that we see, unfortunately, at hardcore shows with a lot of new kids where they stage dive, but it's more of a stage fall. This is a proper like vaulting situation. That's definitely something. I mean, that's a much better thing for sure. I would give that like a B- probably. Okay. It's hard to execute. However, you just have to be careful, not to grab the singer's neck, because sometimes it gets yanked too hard, and because I'm old and frail now, that might disconnect a part of my cervical spine here. So I got to be, I don't need any muscle strains as I age here, but I will say like that, that's a much cooler move, especially if you get height on the jump, or if you do a flip like into it, that's a much cooler mosh move, I would say. How do we feel about cartwheeling, whether on like kind of like in the pit or going off the stage? How do we feel about like an actual cartwheel? Like a full cartwheel, legs are properly extended to put an air max in someone's face properly. I mean, that's again, moshing is not supposed to be acrobatic, in my opinion. Stage diving is. Okay. Right. So, but like actual moshing, like, I mean, I guess for me, this conversation, I don't want to sound like an asshole, but for me, like violent moshing is preferable, within reason. I don't like goofy moshing, and the style of moshing has to match the band, in my opinion, right? Like if All Out War is playing and someone's spin kicking, that's like what I would expect, 100% acceptable. Sure. If Youth of Today is playing, I want people to be stage diving and skanking and not spin kicking. But
really like, as far as me personally, I may never ever, full on hit a pit again. Just it's not worth the risk at this point. Um, but when I did, it was mostly very violent arm movement, and during underdog or youth today style youth crew, I would always do the skank, and then I was really into the head walk for a long time. Because I like challenging the acrobatic part from the stage dive.
Mm-hmm.
Can I make this jump? How far can I get head walking? Can I jump off this railing and so that was like a fun part of stage diving. But now, I do not want to like hurt myself, moshing or stage diving. I just think that's not a smart thing to do as an older person at this point. So.
That's totally fair. I'm a few years behind you, but I'm pretty much in the same boat at that point. The very last, workout related mosh move that I want you to grade is I would say it's the human med ball toss. So this is when someone grabs someone who's kind of like looming on the stage a little longer than they should and just tossing them into the crowd.
Well, I hate people who are stage like they I guess I would say they're stage welcome. So
stage welcome? What do you mean by that?
So like people who aren't supposed to be on stage, right? You're welcome to go on stage, right? Like, like the term, they outstayed their welcome, right?
Oh, I see.
So like they've stayed here much too long. Like get on stage, sing along for, 5-8 seconds, then stage dive off. Or
I would even argue that's probably too long.
I'm being very generous with the seconds.
Right. Okay.
But I really like, you see it a lot more now where people like are like on stage, like, dude, just get off the stage, right? Like I've seen bands do a lot meaner things and throw you off, right? So, it's definitely something. Enjoy the show, but don't stay on stage for a minute, and I'm not talking about people who are watching from the side. I'm talking about people who are like, in the way of like the band. I mean, that's a little ridiculous from my opinion.
Yeah, I think it's like as someone that grew up with video games, I think it's like there's certain platforms in Super Mario Brothers where the minute that you step on it, it like turns yellow and then it starts to fall. That is the same amount of time that you should be on stage. Like you get on, you have your moment to either assess, and then you just go. And my biggest pet peeve is when people get on stage to stage dive and they kind of like get to their spot and then they like beckon people to move up. It's like, no, you got on stage knowing how many people were moved up to the front or not, and you just have to work with what you got.
Yeah, you got an audible at that point. So going back to the grade, I would give that an A, because we don't want people hanging on stage who, need to get off, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I like that we're ending with an A, and encouraging the folks at home. If you're at a fest and you're seeing someone stay out too long, remember you listen to this podcast, and we're kind of giving you the clear to medball. James is like, no, we're not doing that.
Well, I don't advocate violence. However, if you're on stage for too long, just stage dive off. It's okay.
Right.
You can save yourself by A, stage diving feet first, or B, doing a stage dive in which you do a turn and hold the stage so that you're not risking falling on your head.
Yes.
Because I've been at shows where people, fall on their neck, and we don't need that either. So
yeah. There's the acrobatics. Watch a couple videos. You'll pick it up pretty easy.
That's right. Yeah. Learn from the videos.
Yeah. I would say like just seeing some of I've only seen Harm's Way live, I think just once when you guys came up to Calgary to play Wild Rose. I wouldn't say that you're the most active front person of like saying a bunch of like side to side, like all that kind of stuff. Like, I don't think that that's kind of your thing, but I know also
not really.
Yeah. So I think I wanted to ask, what comes more natural to you? Like doing, like speaking to people at a hardcore show to kind of like do the front person thing, or like speaking to your students to get them excited about whatever's going on that day?
I mean, I'll just say like my personality, obviously lots of bands, they like to encourage crowd participation or whatever. I mean, that's never really been my thing. I guess for me, I'm down for whatever people want to do. I guess for me, that's just not really like a harm's way thing. I don't think I've ever done a mosh call my entire life.
That's very impressive, honestly.
And it's just, like I said, it's just not my thing. Obviously lots of bands do it, but so that doesn't come natural to me at all. Whereas like, getting my students excited, I mean, usually, I try to at least make it a little more engaging and exciting. But in my opinion, like I would hope that, if people want to go off for harm's way, they go off. I don't ever feel the need to encourage, those types of things necessarily,
Yeah, it's kind of like, even just in the music itself, there's a lot of sections that, in a live setting maybe it makes sense to do kind of an accent, like a or something like that. But like a lot of the parts, even just on the recordings, just kind of like flow into one another, and I feel like they hit just as hard as if it had that little emphasis from you or not.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's just, I guess it's just not part of my personality. I think I've talked about this before, but my favorite mosh call of all time is from the Sepultura live record, and they're playing São Paulo, and Max goes like, São Paulo, show the world, and then they go into the breakdown.
Yeah, I've heard you talk about this before. Yeah.
It's, I do that, like, to me, like, you might like, that's one of the coolest things ever.
Right?
Because probably they were playing to 50,000 people, and probably 25,000 moshed to that part, right? So that's cool. Like, but I can't beat that. So like,
yeah, that's the highest, like, that's like the North Star of what everyone is trying to do when they're playing to like 100 kids, and they're like, trying to channel that same energy.
No, absolutely.
So we're going to take a hard turn into Soda World. I've been following you for a long time here, James. And then the minute that you started the soda reviews, I like literally was like rubbing my hands together. I was like, this is my shit, because, aside from doing a Bev check for this podcast, like I have a Bev account so I can keep track of all my, Bev ventures when I go and find stuff. So I was very perplexed by you starting that, and you've kept it going. And if anything, you have like 2 shows now. You got the soda reviews, and then you got your Cokes and Cards series. So like,
sure.
Were you just like dying to start something like that, or like what was the initial idea to get that ball rolling?
So truthfully, I started doing it to make fun of food reviewers.
Okay.
Because, like a lot of stuff online, is like, they're like, everyone, like some guys critiquing like this restaurant, like, probably some family like spent their whole life like creating this restaurant. And then, you get like some person who, even if they're a little bit popular, could, stop people from going to this place, based on a review. So like, I always kind of thought that food review culture was kind of silly. So I thought it'd be funny to do, fountain drink reviews. As a person who drinks a lot of fountain drinks, I actually do think they, the reviews are not a joke, in the sense that I truly believe like the rating system is accurate.
Yeah. And you're critical, there's nothing that feels too like, it feels on the nose, but it still feels like coming from a place of like being educational at the end of the day.
Sure. I mean, I think like if you people who have, obviously gotten fountain drinks with their meal, there's tiers to how good it is, and for me, as I mentioned at the beginning that, I don't ever have a meal without a Diet Coke. Like, and, and specifically Coke, like I don't drink, like I'm not a Pepsi guy. You know, I have like on occasion have like settled for obviously a Pepsi product, because I would say I'm a soda first person. So like I don't ever want to have a meal without a soda.
Got you. Because I was
and
gonna
it's
ask, like, have you gone to a place and they're like, sorry, we just carry Pepsi, and you're like, a little single tier, and you're like, I guess no soda today. But it sounds like you're not like playing sides, but you have a preference clearly.
Well, I'm definitely playing sides. I've left
Okay.
restaurants
Oh, you
that didn't have Coke before.
Yeah.
I mean,
you're like, I'll go down the street. It's all good.
But there's and like there's like places I won't go because they have Pepsi. So like for example, like KFC has Pepsi, and even though I like KFC, I rarely ever go there because I don't want Pepsi with my food. Taco Bell was also a place like that where I never order a drink and I take it home,
You do like the combo, like order at Taco Bell and then get your soda somewhere else kind of thing.
That's correct. That's correct. So, sit down restaurants, like, again, like, the restaurant is not as good if they serve Pepsi, in my opinion. It just, I don't know because Coke costs more to carry. So, I feel like if you're not putting that much thought into like in my opinion, like soda complements a meal very well, like I'm a big steak guy, right? So like steak and having like, a Diet Coke, it's like that pairing to me is really good, and like Pepsi just doesn't hit the same way, I will like to say if regular soda didn't have so much sugar, like I love regular Coke, but I made the full transition probably like when I was like 19, 20 to like 90% diet. So
got you.
But yeah, that's the that's the soda rundown. I'm sure people really wanted to hear 30 minutes about soda, but hey, that means a lot. That's something I have a strong opinion about.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you're also in the know about seltzers, and like, the fact that Pepsi owns bubbly, and then you look at Coca-Cola and their main seltzer of choice is I don't know if you've had it's called AHA.
Yeah.
I've historically talked so much shit on bubbly. I think it's like way overhyped. I think it's like the literally level one like person like when it comes to drinking like sparkling water. AHA has just way more like cool flavor choices and just is way sicker in my opinion. But there's a lot of people that
I agree 100%. Bubbly is not good. No. I never buy bubbly. AHA has a green tea flavor that I love. And that for a while, that's all I drank was that and diet soda. I mean, Coke, I would say Coke is better at every single thing except maybe like the Coke energy drinks. I forget which one. They used to own NOS, I know, which is not great. And I don't know what else they own now, but I think Pepsi, do they own Monster, or they used to own Monster, or they own Rockstar. They own Rockstar.
Yeah, which is like
I think Monster.
I don't know anyone drinking Rockstar respectfully. Like,
Rockstar sucks. Rockstar is horrible.
Have you had this before? It's called a Brio. I'm not a big like Coke and like I don't drink a lot of that, but like I love drinking one of these with like a fresh slice of za.
I don't know if I've ever seen that before actually. Like I said, like I'm pretty true to the classic,
right.
Coca-Cola if I go regular. But there is like some other good cola beverages. Cause I love colas, period. Like Europe has, like a lemonade and Coca-Cola mixture.
Oh wow.
But it's its own brand. And that one's really good. And they also have, an orange too. It's called Mezzo Mix. Like that I really like too.
Hmm.
But that doesn't come like in Europe. There's only Coke Light and Coke Zero. They don't have any other diet stuff really.
Oh wow. So it's slimmer
Yeah.
pickings over there.
Way slimmer.
I was gonna ask is like, I want to leave a lot of the discovery of a lot of these things. People can go check out your Instagram. But
Sure.
the general question I had on the soda reviews in all the, I think you've done 30 plus at this point. Like,
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
yeah, like consistency wise, where have you found like the go-to spot? And like, what's like the perfect like situation when it comes to you getting your soda, and like who's the distributor to have that consistent through line for you?
I mean, this is not a view only held by me. McDonald's has the best fountain drink by far. And I've had some, like I've done some research of why that is, and like there was a video that came out that said it was because the straw is bigger, so it allows you more liquid to go.
Okay.
But I actually don't believe that's the reason. I knew someone who worked at McDonald's, and basically they have a special like contract with Coke. So basically the dispensers are like way better than like any other place. So like they have a guy who comes in and like makes sure the Coke and the syrup is like distributed properly, and it makes sure that it's carbonated to a certain degree. And I mean, I don't think I've ever had a McDonald's Coke that's been bad. And so, whereas like, if you go to any other like fast food restaurant and you get a fountain drink, like it can be pretty inconsistent. Like sometimes, it's too syrupy, or sometimes like for me, the one that like I hate is like when there's no carbonation. Cause like, I don't want to drink syrup water, so,
yeah, of course.
But yeah, McDonald's, I mean, that's the highest one that's rated. And I've yet to have something that's been as consistent. And, I mean, Coke and McDonald's, I mean, that's been, a staple for many, many years. I don't eat at McDonald's very often, but I do get a fountain drink a lot.
Right. When it comes to, I guess, like, because I know Harm's Way is going on tour with Ingrown and Jive Bomb and Fleshwater to promote the new record. And I don't know if this is specifically on, any riders or anything specifically, but if there was a Coke fountain drink situation on your rider for either that tour or stuff to come, like for people that really want to be on your good side, like what's the perfect thing that you show up at the venue and you get to the green room and that's sitting and waiting for you?
All right. So the issue with having fountain drinks like already there is that the ice melts and it actually waters down the beverage. So like,
sky's the limit, man. You could be like, you could install a full like fountain drink machine that's, for my pouring and ready to go.
I actually think that would be a great idea to have, but again, it would probably cost way too much money, and I would never actually ask for this. But like literally yesterday, I was looking up how much it would cost to buy a fountain drink machine, like for the house. And I found like a restaurant quality Coke one for $2,500.
Dude, that's not that much.
No, it really isn't. I mean, and I don't know. I mean, how long would the syrups last? I mean, that might last a year or years, So I don't know. I mean, obviously I'd have to buy the cans of syrup. I'd have to have someone come in and install the lines. Like that's what they would have to do at the green room, which it might be, economical. It'd be definitely cheaper than buying canned sodas. Right. Because I mean, even obviously we don't drink, or, most of our members of the Harmless Way don't drink. So, they could, use it for mixed drinks in the back, in the green room, whatever. But, I think it would actually be not a horrible idea to have it just so bands could use. But, I think in the next year, I'm probably going to just commit and get my own fountain.
Dude, I need to see that picture when you pull the trigger on that, so I can just take this portion of the podcast and be like, yo, it's happening. We did it.
Have you ever seen the movie Richie Rich with Macaulay Culkin?
Of course, yes.
Okay, so the scene where he has like his own McDonald's in his house? There is a scene too, I believe. Maybe I'm misremembering, but he has his own Slurpee machine. Is that true?
I think so. Yeah, because I imagine for you having the machine, it would be like 4, maybe 8 slots, but they would all be Diet Coke. They would just have the same label on it.
100%. I'd probably get I think there's one that has 6, and that's the one that's 2,500. I'd probably go 3 Diet Cokes, 1 regular Coke, and then I'd do a Coke Zero and a Sprite for it when I had, parties or something,
That's for the guests. That's for everyone. This side is mine. It's the it's the A side, B side of the soda machine world. Exactly.
Because, one of my biggest pet peeves is when you go to a party or you go to someone's house and they only have like tap water. Like, come on, man. Like, you got to give it the times. At least have some seltzers in the fridge,
Yeah, dude. I hung out with my brother just this afternoon. We were watching the Ahsoka premiere that came out today, and I was like, you have any sparkling water? And he's like, no. And I was like, what's wrong with you, man? Like I'm stocked all the time. There's certain bevs that I have like saved that are a little bit more special for like doing stuff like this, but I'm low right now. I gotta hit the grocery store like tomorrow. So
yeah, because soda at the grocery store has gotten pretty expensive, Costco. I mean, I'm a big Costco guy, so I think Costco's 35 pack is $15. And that's like the best deal like right now because the 12 packs are like $8.99 now, which is crazy.
Yeah.
It used to be like $2.99 or $3.99, so Costco. There we go. A big shout out to them.
Big plug.
I love Costco.
To the airplane hangar with no windows. So last soda related question before we kind of move on to some of the final things I want to hit you with rapid fire mode.
Sure.
What is the fountain drink that you think should be eradicated from this earth? What do you think is like either gets love that you just hate with every bone in your body? If you could make a soda wish and snap it off the face of the earth, what has to go?
Man, I don't hate necessarily. I will say, like, I don't like when they have Powerade or lemonade on the fountain machine.
Okay.
Like, to me, a fountain drink machine should only have carbonated beverages. So, like, because I have a friend who, he's like, oh, I don't drink soda. But then he like gets a lemonade. And I'm like, dude, lemonade has more sugar than soda, and like, it's just like, I feel like it almost tricks people. Like lemonade isn't better for you than Coke. It's probably worse.
Right.
So like, it's just, get rid of the lemonade, get rid of the Powerade, stick with the basics,
All right. So not necessarily getting it off of the earth, but at least out of the soda machines at the very least.
I mean, there's a drink I've had, but it was at the Coke Museum. I'm not sure what country it's from, but it was a menthol flavored drink.
Excuse me?
It was awful. I mean, it was one of the worst tasting drinks I've ever had in my life. I can't remember where it was from, but it was like drinking like mouthwash, and that drink should be definitely eradicated. That should not exist.
Okay. So the menthol drink that for some reason is in a soda machine somewhere in the States.
Well, it's at the Coke Museum.
Oh, is that? We got to get
the
Coke
World
on
of
the
Coke.
line. You got a problem.
Well, it's a Coke product, but it's from a different country. We don't carry it here.
Oh.
But it's I can't remember the actual name. Um, there's another drink that's from Italy called the Beverly. If you go to World of Coke, that they joke about because it's super bitter. But I actually like that drink. So, but because the menthol drink, I mean, it's like you're drinking mouthwash and cigarettes. It is fucking terrible.
Man, so it's Coca-Cola branding? I'm just trying to look it up here.
Yeah, I mean, it's a Coke product in another country. So like,
Oh,
it's
okay.
just because different countries carry different Coke products.
Oh, yes, of course. Yeah, there's like a Coca-Cola in like a green can, but I don't know if that's the one.
No, because it's not cola flavored.
Oh, I see.
It's literally like its own drink.
Okay. Well, I'll do some Bev research.
Yeah, do
I
some
knew that I was
research
going to do
on it,
that
yeah.
post this podcast anyways. So, okay, James. So I have a few kind of like rapid fire stuff that we'll get into, and then we'll kind of close off here.
Sure.
Any updates on the petition to get you into the next Mortal Kombat game that you signed a few years ago? Do you remember that?
I do remember. I mean, I thought it was more funny. I mean, obviously,
the
being in a video game would be fun.
It's like all the backers. It's like, why did you sign this? And it's your name, and it's like because it's me or something like that.
Really? No, I mean, that's I don't remember doing that, but I'm very pro video games, so me being in one would be pretty funny.
Yeah. Let's get Vitalo on the line. I'm sure he's got to connect to the Mortal Kombat folks to help promote the new record that way.
Perfect.
Wanted to ask about just how has being a front person in a band benefited you when it comes to teaching, and just kind of like have you had like a connection point there, or do you kind of like keep those things totally separate?
So I definitely try to keep those worlds separate if I can. I mean, obviously, I have a very unique last name. I think my extended family is the only family that has my last name. So if you search my last name, it's all things about Harm's Way and stuff. So, kids obviously know about it. And over the years, I've gotten a little more comfortable with sharing, about that life. And I mean, because kids are going to find out anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But, I think one benefit from it is that the kids tend to respect me more. I feel like, especially I teach high school. So, high school kids, when they see what's beyond the teacher, and that you're not just, a teacher barking orders at them,
Mm-hmm.
That you're an actual person, you have interests outside of school. I think that gains a certain amount of respect.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think that it definitely helps in that way. I think it helps students also who may be interested in, music, kind of come out of their shell and ask you some questions. And, I've definitely had a lot of kids that, maybe they wouldn't have ever had that connection with the teacher, talk to me about it. Not necessarily hardcore. Like there's been a few kids who've been into hardcore that have, talked to me about that. But it's mostly just kids who are trying to find out new music, who are interested in being in bands, that type of thing.
Yeah.
So I think that connection can be quite useful. So
yeah. When's the last time you had the Harm's Way burger at Puma's?
So that burger only existed 2 times ever.
2 times ever?
It was available.
Oh, okay.
It was available for 30 days. I can't remember if that was 2016 or 17. And we actually had called them in advance, and I think we got it the last day it was available. And then the in Indianapolis opened at Kuma's. I think it was in 2018 that we we played. I think we were on tour with Cannibal Corpse, and we went over there. And we had the burger a second time.
Gotcha.
But that it's only been available for the limited time. So last time I had it was in Indianapolis. I don't know if they'll ever bring it back, but
I mean, new record out. No better time to bring it back at this point for a season.
Sure. Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, they make a very good burger for sure.
What was the next thing? Oh, I know you're into Arnold movies, and as am I. Top 3 Arnold flicks that don't get enough love. Obviously, people are going to talk about the Predators and the T2s, but I know that you've shared some appreciation for Total Recall, which is one of my favorite Arnold movies of all time. I refuse to watch the newest adaptation of it because I think it's like absolute butcher of that movie.
Oh yeah, I mean the non-Arnold version, I don't want anything to do with. So I would say number 1 underrated is Twins. Actually,
okay, interesting.
I like Twins. I don't know why, but I like Danny DeVito a lot. So, it's obviously a silly movie and the premise is goofy, but I feel like it's underrated because it's like an Arnold comedy and not Arnold action. I think people always tend to forget about Conan. Like people think they like Conan, but they never include it in like a top action movie, list of Arnold. But Conan to me is fucking awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. It's tough. I mean, obviously my actual top 3 is T2, Predator, and probably T1.
I think when you talked about this on Hard Lore, you were tied between T1 and Total Recall.
Yeah. So I love Total Recall as well. And I was going to say, like, I mean, it's just tough because Total Recall is just like, as a storyline, is fucking sick.
Yes.
Oh, but T1, 100%. I think T1 has worse acting, but is a more brutal movie. But I don't know. I don't love, excuse me.
Yeah, get that Diet Coke. That'll solve all the problems.
I've been talking all day. I've been teaching all day. There's a few, like I like some of the newer Arnold movies, like, or I guess, in the late 90s, like Last Action Hero, I love.
Great flick.
I think that movie's underrated, actually.
Yeah. I think Eraser is also very underrated.
I was just gonna say that. I was just gonna mention I love Eraser, but I haven't watched it in a long time. But someone told me that they watched it recently and it wasn't good. But I think that movie, like when it came out, I loved that movie. I actually don't mind the newest Terminator either. The one with Arnold.
Yeah, not like cameo version. I think isn't there like a few of those with him?
Well, there's T3 where he's full on in it. Then there's the one with Christian Bale.
Yeah, that's Salvation, right? And then it's CGI Arnold.
Yeah, I'm not talking about CGI Arnold. I don't even count that one. Right. There's another one in between, I think. With I think the girl from Game of Thrones is in it.
Oh, okay. I'm trying to remember.
I think that's in between that and then the one with Linda Hamilton and Arnold. Obviously it's not, as good as the 1 and 2, but I thought it was pretty good. And then, I mean, I think also underrated. I mean, I know I just listed like 8 movies, but Commando, I think.
Oh, Commando? Wow. Yeah, that's I mean,
flat out ridiculous. Like, just honestly, that one scene, I think he kills like 300 people. But that's a movie that I watch quite a lot, actually. So,
so we talked a lot about top Arnold movies. Do you have an all-time favorite Arnold quote? because when I was first discovering all the Arnold movies, I was working with someone who like sent me this like 160 of Arnold's best one-liners from all of his movies, and like that YouTube video is like baked into my brain, and so I would like watch the quote and then go watch the movie. But I'm curious if you have like a favorite one-liner from the man, the myth, the legend.
I think my favorite ever is, from Commando, actually, when they're, after they take his daughter and they're like, they're trying to like get him to like give them money or whatever. And he's like, you're going to compromise, right? And he goes, wrong. And he just shoots him.
Wrong.
I love that scene. He's built his whole career on one-liners, which is, but that scene is great.
I like I forget which movie it's from, but he's holding the guy over the edge of the cliff, and he says, "Remember when I was going to kill you? I said I was going to kill you last." He's like, "Yeah, that's right, man." He's like, "I lied," and then he just drops it.
Yeah, that's Commando.
Yes,
Commando.
It was Commando. Yeah.
There's a lot of also one of my favorites is in Conan, when he's like Crom, the hell with you, like the god Crom.
Right.
I like that scene is just cool because it's kind of like, fuck you, God.
Yeah.
Basically. But
there's been like the amount of times that I've said put that cookie down now, like during the holidays, is like if you had a dime every time.
Shit, I didn't even mention that. That might be number one, underrated, actually.
Mm-hmm. I would say that's a holiday classic at this point.
Yeah, but it wasn't always though.
Yeah,
like I think that became more popular later.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Jingle All the Way. That's top tier.
When he's
right
fighting
there.
all the Santas in the factory, come on, that's amazing.
Dude, that part's. Dude, Arnold. He's. Have you seen the documentary on Arnold?
I haven't watched
Netflix?
it. No.
I suggest it. It's really good.
Okay.
It goes through his three eras basically of bodybuilding, then into action, movie star, into politician. But it's cool because he is on it as as an older person now, and kind of comments on certain things, like kind of critiques himself about stuff. I enjoyed it quite a bit.
Yeah, he's an absolute G. Okay, I have one final thing before we get into our last.
Sure.
So this is a 52-second song. I don't know if you've heard this before, so I don't want to give the band or where people can find the song too much attention. And we can cut this out too if you're like, oh, let's not talk about that. But I just found it funny. So hopefully you can hear this.
Pligge is a hawk. My guy wanna be king. Those muscles in his foot, they make me wanna masturbate.
Have you heard this before?
Pligge is a hawk, and this I can't take.
I think someone showed me before.
So I don't need to play that whole song, but I was just like, what is this?
It's clearly a big fan of James Pligge, so I can't argue that. It's
some quality lyrics, like grade A certified beef without the fucking steroids. Also, a call out to maybe join Harm's Way. So it's like, I don't know.
Yeah, it's not a bad punk song, to be honest.
It's pretty on brand, but just kind of a.
So yeah, I'm never going to criticize anything where someone is praising me as a human being. So that's something I think someone showed that to me a long time ago. But yeah, I'm all for songs about me being
Good looking?
A good guy.
Okay.
Yeah, a good guy. So,
Okay.
All right.
James, the very last question before we start to wrap up the podcast, and I get every guest who comes on to kind of, send us off with this way. Tell me a favorite mosh-related story that you would like to end on. So that's something that could be wholesome. It could be something gruesome. It could be something that you did or happened to you at a Harm's Way show or just a show you're attending. Whatever's first in your head is how we start to end towards the end of the episode.
Oh, man.
And I know there's a million things coming to you right now.
I mean, I think honestly my favorite crowd thing I ever did was probably during This Is For You Fest, the first time Harm's Way ever really played a festival. In Florida. That was in Daytona, Florida. And I don't know if some people who may listen to this may remember, but when This Is For You Fest was going on, the venue that it was at, they had these bars on the ceiling. And I just used those to my full advantage. And I remember, we were playing and, maybe a few people had heard us before, probably not many, but, I got on there and I started climbing out and I just started kicking people hanging on the monkey bars and trying to go there and just kind of kicking the crowd, not too hard, of course. But I remember that being a very cool, because that was kind of the first time I had ever played a live show. I think outside of Chicago for Harm's Way, because that was our first tour ever. And I just remember that was the era of me going into the crowd a lot. And I would either say that or when we played Burning Fight in Chicago in 2009. We played at a venue called the Metro, and I don't know if you've ever seen the Metro stage, but it's pretty high. And I just jumped straight off into the crowd, feet first. And years later, several people came up to me and they're like, "Yeah, you know what? You realize that show that you almost killed me because you almost landed on me from this." Yeah. Extremely high.
You were a secret missile just coming down to these people on the ground, pretty much.
Yeah, it's that. So I would say probably those two are my favorite. I mean, there's other ones of the most recent one is when I can't even remember the name of the festival, but it was 2019. Harm's Way played a fest in Cleveland, and I didn't know what to expect. We were kind of headlining the smaller stage. And people out of any time in my whole life of playing shows, I'd never seen that many people stage dive for Harm's Way.
Wow.
And it was just constant stage diving. And so it was packed all the way in there. And so I thought it'd be a good idea to stage dive and then go to the merch because here's our last song. And I stage dove.
It was a bit of a shortcut. You're I'm going this way anyways.
And the stage dive was fine. And I kind of came down and my arms were around two people and I cool. But during the transition, I turned my arm over and my elbow was just sitting on someone's shoulder and someone stage dove while that was happening and stage dove. And I hyperextended my elbow to a point where I thought I snapped my arm in half.
Oh my God.
That's how. And I probably tore something. I never got it checked out, but even to this day, my elbow hurts in the area where that happened. And that was kind of my cue to be all right, well, I'm not going to do this anymore because now I can't move my arm.
I will get off the stage normally and then walk to the merch.
That's correct. So, I'll leave that question with that one because that one's kind of funny to me at this point.
Yeah, no, three great stories, all coming from one single question. Some people just they share one thing and then it just kind of snowballs.
Sure, I mean,
else.
yeah.
my dog's just crying to go up the stairs here. But you know,
Sure.
James, all of the info about the new record, all of your stuff, and all of the info about the band will be in the show notes in the description of the podcast.
Great.
Anything you want to shout out, anything you want to plug, or anything you want to send the people off on, the floor is yours.
I just want to say, thanks for people supporting Harm's Way for, 17 years. Hard to believe we've been a band for that long. I'm really excited about the tour, really excited about the record. And obviously I want to thank, everyone in the band, Nick, Bo, Chris, Casey. This is, Nick and Casey had a lot to do with the writing process of the record. They were, Nick is like a riff master. And it's important for, me to just say that, Nick is, pretty much wrote every single riff on this new record. And, with the help of Casey and Chris, obviously he's an incredible drummer. He helped write the drum parts, and, obviously we all, kind of collaborated at the end, in the studio. But, I just want to mention those guys because I think a lot of times those guys get forgotten in the band just because they are the newest members. But they are, more important in this band, than, people even know, as far as creating the music and the music videos even. And they were just such a big part of everything. And, it's important that people know that, in my opinion. So I just want to shout out them. And, I'm really excited to start touring again. I've only played 6 shows in the last 4 years. So
Wow.
It'll be nice to get back playing more consistently and start touring again.
Yeah, no, I'm very, very wholesome, shout out to, a lot of the people that are involved in the new record. Common Suffering is going to be out through Metal Blade Records on the 29th of September of this year. And then Harm's Way is going to be on tour again with Fleshwater, Ingrown, and Jive Bomb a lot of October and into November. Hitting a lot of spots all throughout the state. So definitely go check out the info in the description. James, thanks again for the great conversation. I'm going to see y'all in Toronto for Hold Your Ground Fest, which I'm very, very excited about. And thanks again for the great chat. I hope that we can do it again sometime.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.